Yeah. Okay. So we go back to the there. Okay. So last time we did the idea of grammars as generative mechanisms for languages. By different kinds of derivations using rules of grammars, we could generate different sets of strings. So, you know, each grammar generates a language. That is, every string within the language can be derived from the start symbol of the grammar. And you know, we had grammars like this, which generated strings of the form a raised to n, b raised to n for arbitrary n. You know, you saw how this grammar worked. We also saw a grammar for palindromes. What language does this generate? Piyush? All strings over AB such that Piyush is not answering. How about Pooja? Please unmute yourself. It is not enough just to log in. I think we will be requiring that you do answer. So I'm requesting Piyush or Pooja to unmute. Okay, we pass on. We will not mark them as present today. Rani, Piyush is there.
Sir,
Piyush?
present, sir. I
What?
am present, but
Yeah.
I
So
don't.
what language you
I'm
think
not.
is?
I'm not able to answer, sir.
Okay, just think. No, what kind of string will it derive? Can you at least? Can we try? Because then that is a bit like tutorial. So we start with S and then apply some rule. Let's say we apply the second rule. S goes to BSB. So we'll rewrite this as what? BSB. Now we apply one more rule, whichever rule we like. You know, there is the choice is up to us. And depending on rules we apply, we will get different strings at the end. So suppose you apply the rule S goes to A, then what will you get? In this string, S is replaced by
A.
A. So
Yes, yes.
what string you will
Yes.
get? This B will remain as it is. This S is substituted by A.
BAB.
Right. So this is the string we got. So BAB belongs to this language. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Some other strings that will belong to this language will also be of the form, say, BAAB. Can this be derived? Piyush? Can BAAB be derived from in this grammar?
If S is replaced by B. No, sir.
No, let's try. Can we do this string? So I will do this here at the top. We start with S. Now, what are the outermost letters in this string?
BB. B
So
and
we
B.
need to use some rule which will say that we get outer BBs and then inside we recursively try to derive the inner
Double
part.
A.
So which rule will you use?
Uh, S goes to BSB and then
Correct. So I will write that S goes to BSB. And then next step. So this is
uh,
one step.
S
This is one. Now
S
this S
B
goes to,
by uh,
well, the
epsilon.
inner, no,
S
if
should be
S goes
replaced
to
by
epsilon, you
AS.
will get string BB.
S should be replaced by ASA and then
Right.
uh,
Correct.
yes, and then
So
instead of S, and then again S is replaced by epsilon.
that's also a move. Huh? You don't
Yes.
forget. You cannot do it all in one step. You know, the
Okay.
machine goes step by step. So here
Yes.
we'll use S goes to epsilon and we'll get BAAB, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
one characteristic of this string is that it gives all language, all words such that the reverse of the word is same as itself. These are called palindromes. You read them backwards or forwards, they read the same. And why? Because assume that S derives such a palindrome, a more complex word you will derive by adding A's on both sides. So if inside word is reversible, by adding two A's on the at the front and back, you will get a reversible word. Adding B at both sides, you will get a reversible word. A by itself is a reversible word, so you can pad it with this further A's and B's according to the first two rules, right? So that's the logic. But somewhere you've got to argue that you know exactly this is the language which is generated by this grammar. But intuitively it should be clear. We did that last time. You should go through the video. Okay. We also did this balanced parenthesis language, and we gave this was the grammar for it. Okay. And we gave some argument that this balanced parenthesis language is generated by the grammar. So this is all last time. I won't go into it. Now, you know, these were kind of arbitrary grammars. S could go to any alpha in the grammar. We can choose S to go to any alpha or any non-terminal for that matter. Any non-terminal can go to any alpha where alpha is an arbitrary string over non-terminals and terminals, right? Including epsilon. So S could go to SS, or S could go to bracket S bracket. I mean, depending on what you want to generate, you can have different kinds of alphas there. There is no restriction on what this alpha is, right? And those are context-free grammars. And as I told you, context-free grammars are very useful in defining artificial languages which are used in computers, including what are valid HTML documents, what are valid C programs, what are, you know, valid SQL queries, you know. So it has very deep impact on language theory. They are also used in studying natural language processing in computational linguistics. So when you want to translate English to German, first you will try to fit that English into some grammar, and then you will transfer that English grammar into equivalent German grammar, and then, you know, by that grammar you will translate. So this is one way of translating, doing machine translation. Okay. Now here what we are going to consider is grammars in special forms. So we will not allow arbitrary rules, but we will put some restriction on you know, what kind of rules can there be. And we are going to consider two special kinds of context-free grammars. These are subclasses of context-free grammars. One is called the Chomsky normal form, defined by Noam Chomsky, and another is something called Greibach normal form, abbreviated as GNF, defined by Sheila Greibach. This was defined by Noam Chomsky. It's called Chomsky normal form. And in short, a grammar which is in this special form is called CNF. And a grammar which is in this special form is called DNF. I'll tell you what these forms are, right? So they are also context-free grammars, but the rules have special form there. You know, just as you have arbitrary differential equations, and then you talk about first order differential equations, right? Or you have got polynomials, and then you talk about second order polynomials, which are a subclass. Here is a subclass of grammars called Chomsky normal form grammars, CNF. And here is another subclass called GNF. Now what is CNF? It's easy. Remember, here we had arbitrary set of rules, right? In CNF, there are only two kinds of rules possible. You can take a non-terminal and you rewrite it as exactly two non-terminals. So this is what I call as doubling rules. So every non-terminal goes to two non-terminals. That is allowed in the rule. The other kind of rule is what I call as terminal rule. A non-terminal can be rewritten as a terminal. And once it's written as a terminal, it can't be changed any further in the string, right? So these are the only two kinds of rules permitted, and we get something called the Chomsky normal form grammar. So is the definition clear? Any confusion there? So Chomsky normal form definition starts here and it finishes here. Okay, this is taken from Cozen. And here is an example. This 21.1 is an example of a grammar in Chomsky normal form. Never mind what it does. What does it have? It says S goes to AB, so it's a doubling rule. S goes to AC, it's a doubling rule. S goes to SS, that's a doubling rule. You have another non-terminal, C goes to SB, that's a doubling rule. And then A goes to the letter left bracket. So this is a terminal move. It converts a single non-terminal to a single terminal. Similarly, B goes to right bracket is a terminal move. And those are the only two kinds of moves in this grammar. So this grammar is syntactically in Chomsky normal form. You will be asked, given a grammar, is it in Chomsky normal form or not? And you should be able to decide, right? Is this grammar in Chomsky normal form? So can Rani answer? Rani?
Sir.
Is this in Chomsky normal form?
Yes, sir. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, but there's some background. Yeah, maybe somebody else has got microphone on. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
tell me. So Chomsky normal form has either got doubling rules or they've got terminal rules. There are no other kind of rules permitted. What are the
Yes, sir.
kind of rules here? S goes to SS. What kind of rule is that?
Yes, sir.
Is there some background sound going on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now.
Yes, sir. There's a background noise.
So what kind of rule is that? S goes to SS? Okay, I think maybe I should repeat what I said about definition of Chomsky normal form grammar. Okay. I think you need to pay attention. You cannot be listening to two things. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Happened. Just far back. Right. So Chomsky normal form grammar can only have one of the two kinds of rules. Please. Okay, it can either have a doubling rule where a non-terminal goes to two non-terminals. Right? They can be any non-terminals. They don't have to be distinct. Okay. So in our case, S goes to SS is a doubling rule. Is that clear, Rani?
Yes, sir.
What about S goes to left bracket, S right bracket? Is that rule? What kind of rule? Is it a terminal rule?
No, sir.
No, it's not. You're right. What is the terminal rule? S goes to A is a terminal rule, right?
Yes, sir.
S goes to epsilon. Is it a terminal rule or is it a doubling rule? No. It doesn't go to some AB, right? Capital AB. It also does not go to a terminal symbol. It goes to something other than a terminal symbol, the empty string. So this is also not a terminal move, terminal rule. So this grammar is not in Chomsky normal form, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is a grammar in Chomsky normal form, the 21.1 here, one with this arrow here. Why? Because S goes to AB, AB are just a sequence of two non-terminals, so this is a doubling rule. S goes to AC, you know, is also a doubling rule. S goes to SS is a doubling rule. Similarly, for another non-terminal, C goes to SB is a doubling rule. So all these are doubling rules. Then we have got A goes to left bracket, that is a terminal rule because it translates a letter to a non-terminal to a letter, single letter. And similarly, this translates a non-terminal to a letter. So this kind of grammars are called Chomsky normal form grammars. Okay. And it's kind of tricky to figure out what this grammar does, but in a moment we will see what it does. In fact, it does something very similar to this grammar. First thing to notice is that, so let's do some derivation within this grammar. Let's try to derive. My claim is that it also derives balance parenthesis string. Okay. It also derives the same language as this parenthesis, but there is one problem. There is no way in which it can derive an epsilon. You see, nothing goes to an epsilon. No letter goes, no non-terminal goes to an epsilon. And so it is, do you agree that epsilon cannot be derived in this grammar 21.1? Piyush? Hi, Piyush. Okay, we don't have Piyush up.
Yes, sir.
Can this grammar 21.1 derive the epsilon string? You will start with A and then keep writing using one of these rules. You will get some A, capital A, some string over A, B, C. Finally, all those A's you can convert to left bracket B's too, but how will you ever get an epsilon? Can you get an epsilon? See, these are all length increasing rules. They increase the length of the sentential form. And these things preserve the length, right? And every rule, there is no, to get epsilon from S, you will have to somehow erase something. There are no erasing rules. There are no rules which will shorten a string. So there's no way you can get epsilon in this grammar. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, because whenever you apply these rules, you will get longer and longer sentential forms, no?
Yes, sir.
And you will get some sequences of A, B, C's and S, right? If you apply this
Yes, sir.
rule, the length remains the same. If you apply this rule, the length remains the same. So how will you get an empty string? You cannot, right?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
So there is no way you can get empty string here, right?
Yes.
But you can get the following string if you like. You can get, and now I'm going to try this online, so a little bit of a, but let's try. This grammar will generate, let's say, this balance parenthesis string. This grammar will generate this string. Okay. And how will it do that? See, firstly, what is happening is it is rewriting with a letter capital A. And that capital A can only go to left bracket. That is the only thing that A is doing. So A is almost synonymous to left bracket. Similarly, B is synonymous to right bracket. It is because of the syntactic restriction that we have got these letter non-terminals A and B, but they actually stand for left bracket and right bracket. You cannot do anything else with capital A or capital B. You can only turn it into left bracket or right bracket. There is no rule which says A can be rewritten to something else. It can only be rewritten to this. So these A and B's, think of them as left and right brackets, right? So to derive this string, what will I do? I will start with S, and then in one step of derivation, I know I've got this string which is in two parts. There is a subpart which is fully balanced, and this is also fully balanced. So I will write this as SS because that is a rule allowed to me. And then the first S, I will want to convert into left bracket, right bracket. That is the same as I want to convert it into capital A, capital B. So I will use this rule, and this S I will write as AB S, right? Now what I can do is I can convert the first A into left bracket, and I can choose to convert the second B into right bracket, but I defer that. Instead, I try to decide to open this S. So what will I get? I'll get string B, and this S can be written as something else. Again, I have just a pair of brackets, so I will use the rule S goes to AB, and I will write it as AB, right? Now I have got only ABs in my string, and also the only rules I can apply are the rules on the left hand side. There is no symbol S or no symbol C, so none of these rules apply. So this B I will convert, let's say I will convert the A to left bracket first. So what I will get is left bracket B, and then all the B's I will convert to right bracket. So I'll get left bracket, right bracket, left bracket B. Because in a move, I can only convert one non-terminal to something. I can rewrite only one non-terminal. So I'll get left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket. So this is an example of a derivation within this grammar. Okay. So I hope that's clear to you. Any questions so far? This is the kind of derivation that I get. Now there is a special form of derivation here where we will always pick up the leftmost non-terminal and replace it. So here we picked up the leftmost non-terminal and replaced it by AB. Here we decided to pick up the rightmost non-terminal in the string and replace it. But that, so there are different positions at which you can replace non-terminals. It doesn't matter. You can choose whichever one. You will do the other one little later in the derivation and you will get the same effect. So the order in which you open up the non-terminals does not matter. And maybe as a standard rule, we may follow the discipline that we will always replace the leftmost non-terminals. And so we can get this string also by something called the leftmost derivation. Okay. So I will give you an example of leftmost derivation in this Chomsky normal form grammar. Somewhere I have it.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
In last example, which you asked to Rani, you put S is into bracket S bracket. So if in that question, if we not put epsilon, so it was the language grammar.
Right. You are saying that this was the original. Sorry. I should go back to that slide. Just give me a second to go back there. Then you can ask your question. Yes, this was the original grammar for balanced parenthesis, right?
Yes.
Here, what were you asking?
A bracket S bracket.
So,
I'm confused.
This rule is not there in this grammar, right?
Okay.
So what are you saying about that rule?
I'm asking about why bracket S bracket is not comes in a grammar.
Bracket S bracket is not?
Not in the sentence, means not as a not as a AB and SS. Why?
Oh, why I have not included this rule in this grammar, right?
Yes.
Because I want this grammar to be in Chomsky normal form, where I can only have doubling rules or I can have terminal rules. And this is neither a doubling rule nor a terminal rule, right? So now I am thinking of grammars in special forms, which have got only certain types of rules in it. So while S goes to SS is allowed because it's a doubling rule, doubling production. This S goes to left bracket S right bracket is not either a doubling production or a terminal rule, terminal production. You see that?
So means in language epsilon only comes a brackets, or only comes terminals, right?
Yeah, only terminals. That's
Okay.
right. So here it has to be a terminal, but not epsilon. Epsilon is not allowed here.
So here I belongs to sigma, means sigma is equal to brackets, terminals.
Right. Our alphabet consisted of the right bracket and the left bracket. These were the two symbols which were there. Let me put them in quotes so that brackets don't get mixed. Okay. So you are right. I think your understanding is correct, Parth. But I have generated this balance string using this new grammar, which has only rules in very simple, only rules of the Chomsky normal form. You see that?
Yes.
Now, the claim is it cannot derive epsilon. There is no way it can derive epsilon. But the claim is every balanced parenthesis string, which is not epsilon can be derived in this grammar. It's a large claim. Okay. So somehow you can argue that every string which is balanced parenthesis string, including this one, can be derived in my new grammar, Chomsky grammar given here. So this Chomsky grammar is in some sense almost as powerful as this grammar. Only thing it misses out is epsilon. Okay. I have not given a proof of that. It will become clear in a slide or two. But you can always, give a more complicated grammar for a simple grammar like this, which is in Chomsky normal form. Okay. That's the purpose. Arvind.
Yes, the parent language is context-free grammar, right? I mean,
Yes, any arbitrary context-free grammar. This is also a context-free grammar, but with only certain types of rules.
right. So, I mean, a normal form generally encapsulates everything in a more systematic or a procedural manner. Like if I take an example from like propositional logic, and
Right.
like the CNF and DNF form will
Right.
basically represent any expression in a unique format, right?
So you are absolutely right. The same thing will happen here. The only difference is this epsilon will get missed out. Okay. So since you raised this question, let me raise this. There is also something called Greibach normal form. We'll see it in a minute. But the main theorem that Arvind is referring to is this. You are given any arbitrary context-free grammar G. Okay. Then by some transformation, we can construct another grammar called G prime, which is in Chomsky normal form, such that the language of G prime, you know, the language of this newly constructed Chomsky normal form grammar is same as the language of the original grammar, except for the epsilon removed. If it was not there, nothing is removed. If it was there, epsilon is removed. So except for this string epsilon, everything, this grammar G prime in Chomsky normal form will have the same thing. In this sense, it's a normal form. Do you agree, Arvind?
Yes, sir. But I mean, I'm just concerned about that epsilon.
No, I mean, so it's you know, epsilon is not a very interesting string to derive, right? So you are right.
But I mean, now it means that you can't express any language in CNF or GNF form, right?
Yes,
If
any
it's
language
with
in CNF, CFG form, arbitrary can be written into CNF form. That is what I'm saying. So the idea is just as you constructed a propositional formula to a formula in sum of products form, so that they calculate the same Boolean function, you know, and you had a way of constructing the formula into sum of product form formula. Here you have a grammar G, you have a method of converting G into G prime, such that the languages are same except for epsilon. So it's a very similar idea.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Same thing happens with GNF. Given a grammar G, which is an arbitrary context-free grammar, we can transform it into a specialized form of grammar called Greibach normal form grammar, G double prime. Its language will also be same as language of G except for this epsilon, right? So this Chomsky grammar and Greibach grammar will have same language, and they will be same as the language of the original grammar except for epsilon. This is the theorem, and we'll be seeing the theorem today. Okay. But first let's understand what is Chomsky normal form grammar. Okay, so here was a derivation in this grammar 2.21. Okay, derivation of the string, left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket. Now, I think you can convince yourself with some amount of working offline that any string in this balanced parenthesis language can, except for epsilon, can be generated in this grammar. And I have obtained this grammar by some systematic way of changing the, let me close the window. Sorry, there's some noise outside. Okay. So I have systematically obtained this grammar or 21.1 by doing some massaging to this grammar to put it in that form. Okay, but it will recognize the same language except epsilon. And that we will see. But you should try to generate strings like this. You know, I already showed you derivation of this string. So try string like this. This is also a balanced parenthesis string, right? How will you generate it in this grammar? So you should try that. That's your homework. Okay? Yeah. Now, what is Greibach normal form? In Greibach normal form, it's very different. Here we had either doubling rules or terminal rules. Here we have a rule. Every rule of the grammar has to have the following form. Every non-terminal in a production should go to a string which looks like this. It starts with a terminal called A or any terminal. So it starts with a terminal And then there is a string b1 to bk of non-terminals only, where k can even be 0. Okay, so all non-terminals go to a single terminal, let's say C, followed by some AB. This is allowed. So a terminal follow right hand side of the rule is always a terminal followed by a sequence of non-terminal. It can be even A goes to some single terminal D followed by a 0 sequence of length 0 of non-terminals. So this is allowed and this is allowed. And this can be arbitrarily long. A, B, C can also be there. Right? Capital C. Yeah. Yeah. So is the notion of, grammar in Greibach norm clear to you? You will be asked, given a grammar, is it in Greibach normal form? Okay. So here 21.2 in blue is the example of a grammar in Greibach normal form. And you can see every rule S goes to a terminal called left bracket followed by a non-terminal called B. Here it goes to left bracket followed by sequence of 2 non-terminals. So everything is like this. And here is a rule where B goes to a terminal followed by sequence of 0 non-terminals. So this is a grammar in Greibach normal form. Agreed? Now, derivations in Greibach normal form have very interesting properties. So I think we should look at the derivations that happen within Chomsky normal form and Greibach normal form. So let's look at a derivation. Let me erase this part. It didn't allow me to erase anything. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to use the plain old erasing. Okay, we're going to derive the same string, left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket, this string. Okay, pay attention. This string we are going to derive using this grammar. First thing to notice is in this grammar also there is no way to derive epsilon because there is no production which decreases the length. A single non-terminal goes to a string which is of same length or longer length. That is what happens, right? So there is no way to derive epsilon. So again, we have missed out on epsilon, which is fine. Okay, so let's start with S. Can somebody help me? What should I do? Oops, why is it's stuck in some funny mode? No? I'm in some selection mode. Yeah, that was the problem. Okay. Okay, so how do we derive the string left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket here?
S goes to left bracket BS.
S goes to left bracket BS.
BS.
Right, because in some sense B only stands for the right bracket. B is just a name for the right bracket. You can do nothing else with B, right? So you'll get left bracket, right bracket here. And then there is another S here. So we have used this rule. Absolutely right. And then the next step, please. This is one step derivation. Can you continue? You are right.
B goes to right bracket.
B goes to right bracket. So you have to only go to right bracket. You are using this rule, right? And then S
Yes.
remains as it is, right?
Yeah, and then S goes to left bracket B.
F goes to left bracket B. So I have got left bracket, right bracket, which was already there. And then I rewrite this S into left bracket B, which is given here, right? And then that B I convert to right bracket. So left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket. And these are all in one step. So this is how we derive the string. Now see what is happening. At every step, if you consider the string which is required, at every step we are adding one more letter of the string in the derivation. So we first added the left bracket, then we added left bracket, right bracket at the next stage, then we added left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, and then left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket. This is how we got the string. So in some sense we are generating this string incrementally in this grammar, right? And that is very useful. It is almost like matching this string with this grammar rules, right? And this kind of Greibach normal form rules are very close to some form of automata that we will see for recognizing languages of given by grammars. Okay, so just telling you how the derivation of this thing looks. So if we have a string of length n, how many steps the derivation in the Greibach normal form take?
At least 2n.
Why 2n? At each
At
stage we
least.
will add one letter.
I mean, once we add that letter, if we just want to
see, the point is, in a rule, you don't go via the name for the left bracket. You have to write the left bracket directly. It's only this b that you are adding, which has to be converted to this. So in each step, one terminal gets added to the string, to the sentential form, right? Do you agree with that? If the grammar is in Greibach normal form, in each step of derivation, at least one additional terminal joins the sentential form, because the rules all begin with the sentence, with a terminal.
yes, sir, and I think it was at least n then, not at least 2n.
Right,
For
because even if you get your sentential form much longer than n, then there is no hope, there is no shortening rule, so you can never get the string after that. So you will always try to use rules which will keep you within that length n, right? So you are right. So it will take n steps. So a Greibach normal form has the following property. So let me look at the property of that. Any derivation, here is the, look at this. Suppose we have a string x derived from the start symbol within my grammar G, and the length of the derived string is m. Then in Greibach normal form, how many steps it will take to derive that string? If m is derivable in the grammar from s, and x is derivable from the grammar in m, and the length of x is m, then in Greibach normal form we can only have derivation of length exactly equal to m, right? Because in each step you will derive one more terminal. Correct? Do you have any confusion about this question? So if anybody has a doubt, please ask. We just saw an example that there was a string of length 4 and we could derive it in 4 steps, and that's the only, only 4-step derivations are possible for a string of length 4. Why? Because in every step you add exactly one terminal. So to get 4 terminals, you will have to take 4 steps. There is no other possibility. Agreed? I hope this is clear. It's simple. What happens in case of Chomsky normal form? What happens in case of Chomsky normal form? We can have some doubling rules and then we can have some terminal rules, right? Terminal rules convert exactly one non-terminal into a terminal, right? So let's take a derivation in Chomsky normal form. I have a slide somewhere which gives derivation under, yeah, okay. So this is my grammar in Chomsky normal form. Doesn't matter what this grammar does. Look, S goes to, there is a doubling rule, S goes to AC, there's a doubling rule, S goes to AB, there's a doubling rule, C goes to SB, there's a terminal rule, S goes to terminal A, there's a terminal rule, capital B goes to small b, right? So this is in CNF. I hope you will agree with that. Anybody has doubt about that? This grammar is in Chomsky normal form. And here is a derivation in that Chomsky normal form grammar. Forget the tree. We'll come to the tree in a moment. It's called the parse tree. Okay. So what happens? S goes to AC. Doubling rule is applied. which doubles the length of the which increases the length of the string by 1. Every doubling rule increases the length of sentential from S became AC. Now we use a terminal rule. This capital A is substituted by small a, which keeps the length of the sentential form same. AC, which was of length 2, remains of length 2. Next, this C, to this C we applied the doubling rule, C goes to SB. So the length increases by 1. And then you apply again a doubling rule which says that this S goes to AC, right? So again the length which was 3 increases to 4, right? So every time we apply a doubling rule, the length of the sentential form, these are all sentential forms, increase by 1. And every time we apply the terminal rule, the sentential form length remains the same. Okay. Now if you want to get a string of length m by this kind of derivation process, how many steps we will take? Can anybody answer? You cannot directly write. You'll have to write S goes to some AB and then convert this to an AB and then convert this to AB, right? That is the only thing permitted in Chomsky normal form grammar. Okay. So what happens is, for every letter of the final string, you will have to apply one terminal production to convert its symbol into the terminal, right? So if there are n, if X has got size M, then terminal rules will be applied M times, no more, no less. Because each time you do that, a non-terminal turns into a terminal, right? Do you agree with that? And we have to also get, M non-terminals out of the original S. So we will have to apply how many times we will have to apply the doubling rule in order to get M non-terminals from one non-terminal. With every application, the length increases by 1. So starting with S, if you want to get M non-terminals, we'll have to apply M minus 1 doubling rules. Do you agree? Any confusion? Because in each application of a doubling rule, the length increases by 1. And we want to increase the length from S to M. So we'll do M minus 1 applications of length increasing rules. And you will get a string of non-terminals which is of size M. And that can be converted to string of size M. M terminals by applying the terminal rules. Now, the order in which you apply the terminal rules and the doubling rules doesn't matter. You can apply in any order. You will get the same string. So here what I have done is I have used what is called the leftmost derivation. So I start with S, replace it by AC. Then I pick up the leftmost non-terminal and apply one of the rules related to A, which is why I get AC. Now in this string, the leftmost non-terminal is C. So I decide to replace C by SB, which is given here. So I get ASB, right? And then I have to take the leftmost non-terminal S and I replace it by something that S is allowed. In this case, I choose S goes to AC. So I get ACB. And then I open this A. So every time I'm opening the leftmost non-terminal and applying a rule of my choice till I get this string. Okay, so this is called the leftmost derivation. And if in the grammar there is a derivation, there is also a leftmost derivation for the same string. So, okay, so I hope this is because the grammars are context free. It does apply, whether a rule S goes to AC is applicable or not does not depend on what is around S. You can apply this anytime you see an S. In that sense, it is context free, and hence you can always do leftmost derivation. You can also do rightmost derivation. So here I will pick the rightmost non-terminal and apply the rule to it. So I've got S goes to AC, but now I choose to open up this C. And C goes to SB, so I'll get ASB. Now I choose to open this B. And B always goes to small b, so I'll get AS small b. So like that, I always rewrite the rightmost derivation and I still get the same string. As I said, the order in which you open the non-terminal and rewrite it does not matter in context-free grammar. You can get the same string. So the ordering in which you apply, rules to certain positions in the sentential form don't matter, and we can choose to do either leftmost derivation or rightmost derivation for convenience. Okay, so the grammar admits left or rightmost derivation. I hope this property is clear to you. So what about question to my answer, which I where was that? So properties of CNF grammars. I'm sorry, I have to hunt for it a bit. We have a bit to do. I think we need to hurry up a bit. Okay, so if I have a string of length n, how many steps will it take to derive it under CNF? A string of length m. Anybody can answer? We did this reasoning last time. So Arvind?
So we need n-1 doubling rules and m terminal rules. So
m minus 1 plus m, right? So 2m minus 1. Correct answer. That's the thing. This is clear, right? And so to derive long strings, you will have to do long derivations in both of these grammars, right? This is a fact. Okay, very good. Now we had this theorem that in fact in a any grammar G that we are given, we can transform into a grammar G prime which is in Chomsky normal form, or a grammar G double prime in Greibach normal form, such that they are almost language equivalent except epsilon. Okay, and we are going to see this theorem. So we are going to actually construct these grammars G prime and G double prime given G. So first thing we do, the procedure is in many steps. First thing is that grammar may have what are called epsilon productions or unit productions. What is an epsilon production? In this grammar, S goes to epsilon is an epsilon production. There is no unit production here. Okay, but there are grammars in which there can be unit productions. So maybe I can show you a grammar. Okay, here is a grammar. Can you tell me which of the productions are epsilon productions? Is there an epsilon production in this grammar? So Arin, are you there? Hi Arin. Okay, Rushi. Rushi, are you there? Suraj?
Yes, sir. T going to epsilon.
Yes. So this is an epsilon production, right? Is there a unit production here? Unit production is a form is A goes to B. We are not doing any progress. Instead of deriving string from A, we are going to derive it from B. So is there anything of that form here?
Yeah, S going to T.
Right, exactly. So this grammar has an epsilon production as well as a unit production. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So what we do is we first remove all the construct a grammar G1 which has no epsilon or unit productions. That is without epsilon or unit production, whose language will be same as the language of G except for epsilon string. Epsilon string cannot be derived anymore. Okay, this is the first step we will do. And then this G1 we will take, which has no epsilon or unit productions, and we will convert it into Chomsky normal from grammar, G prime. And then we will take this G prime and we will convert it into the grammar G double prime in Greibach normal form. And the property of G prime and G double prime is that G1 and G prime has the same language, and G prime and G double prime have the same language. So we will have proved this theorem. So is the shape of the proof clear to you? How we are going to do? first we have got to get rid of epsilon and unit productions. Then we have got to convert the resulting grammar into Chomsky normal form. And then we have to convert it into Greibach normal form. This is what we have to do. Three-step process. Yeah. So is the scheme clear to you? Now we will begin. So first we will, given a grammar, we will convert it to one without epsilon or unit productions. And I think it's simple, but yet it is interesting to see how it is done. So you are given a grammar which looks like this, n sigma ps, right? We first construct a new, p is the set of rules or productions. We'll construct a new set of rules called p hat. And this we will do by only adding rules to p. So we'll add more rules to p. And somehow we will claim that the way we have added rules, no new string can be derived. Whatever was derivable in p is now becoming derivable in p prime. But maybe, we will take fewer steps to derive the strings. We'll compress the derivation a little bit by adding extra rules, right? Okay, so let's take an example. What kind of rules do we add in p prime? We keep all the rules of p. And if we have a rule like this in our set, so we'll incrementally go from p to p prime. So we will have a set of rules called q, and initially q is equal to p. So this is the initial value of q. Then what we will do is we will expand the current q, which is q0, to a new set of rules called q1. How do we get that? We do this. If in q, I have got a rule of the form a goes to some alpha followed by non-terminal b followed by beta, and b goes to epsilon, then, generating this b and then replacing it by epsilon is redundant, right? I could have directly gone from a to alpha beta. Do you agree that if I have these two kind of rules in my q, then I can add this rule to my q, right? I think nobody should have confusion about that. So we are working not on a derivation, but on the rule set. If I have a rule like this, a goes to some alpha b beta and b goes to epsilon. These are my two rules. Then I can also add an extra rule which says a goes to alpha beta, and it will derive exactly the same set of strings. Only instead of applying these two steps, I will apply one step in order to get alpha beta, right? So I will add this to my q0 and I will get q1. Now on this q1, maybe there are other pairs like this. So I will further keep expanding q by this rule. I can also expand my q by the following rule. If I have got a unit production, a goes to b, and then b goes to gamma, which is some long string, then I can, why did I go via b and go to gamma? I can add a rule which directly says a goes to gamma and I can add that to my rule set, and I will not change the language. Do you agree? Instead of doing these two steps of derivation, I will directly do this step of derivation. So what we do is, to this q that I have got, if I find pairs like this, I will add rule like this. So this way I'll keep growing my q till at some point in qn no more rules can be added. Everything that could have been added is already added, and I will stabilize, right? So we close our set of productions p by additions like this till we get a closed set of rules, and that is what we call as p hat. We will take an example, right? So given this original set of rules, we have got this new set of rules p hat, and the resulting grammar we call as g hat n sigma p hat s instead of n sigma ps. And the claim is that it will derive same set of strings as the original g. Because all the old rules are there, old strings will be derivable. But there are these new rules we have added, and the claim is that it does not add any extra words which can be derived, although you have added some rules. So first let's take an example of this construction. So I have here a grammar which has got one unit production and one epsilon production, right? And somehow, those are the ones which will lead us to add extra rules. So first we know that s goes to s goes to t and t goes to epsilon, right? So I can directly make S goes to epsilon. That is this rule. If we have a string which says that A goes to alpha B beta and beta goes to epsilon, then I can from A directly go to alpha beta. That is, I can erase this B which was going to epsilon, and that is the rule I can add. Here I have got a rule S goes to T. So I can erase this T and make it go directly to epsilon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, apart from the old rules which are there, ASA, BSB, which remain B, and T, I will add an extra rule. So I will write this in red. I can directly make S go to epsilon by the first rule. Okay. Now I cannot use the first rule to add any further further strings. You know, there is no scope for adding anything else. But I have this second rule also. Second rule says that if by unit production A goes to B and B goes to gamma, then I can directly add A goes to gamma. Here I have got S goes to T. This is my new Q. Original Q was this. This is my new Q. In this, I have got a unit production S goes to T. Also, the other productions remain. Let me write those also. T goes to A, B, epsilon. We are not erasing anything. We have only added this extra rule S goes to. Now I've got S goes to T and T goes to A. Right? So I can add that to the grammar. So what I'm going to get is additionally, I will got all the above things are there. And additionally, I can make S goes to A. Why? Because S goes to T and T goes to the string A. So I can go to A. Similarly, I can add B, right? And S goes to epsilon we have already added. But so that is an example of this rule only. So I can add this also. Okay. So do you agree that I get finally a grammar which looks like this? Let me write this down in full. A, B, S, B, T, then in red epsilon AB, and no change occurs to T because there is no, T does not go to any non-terminal, so T is not going to change. So T remains. T goes to A, B, epsilon as before. So we expanded the grammar by adding these three extra rules. S goes to epsilon, S goes to A, and S goes to B, and it's an application of this. And now I cannot add any further rules because every rule is accounted, every addition is accounted for. If you try to add anything, you'll get the same thing. So you get a closed set under this expansion. So this is the method by which you get P hat. So if I start this with my P, this was my P, then this is my P hat. This is what I get. So is the construction clear? Any confusion you ask me now, please. Arin, is this clear? Rushi?
Hello, sir.
Yes, last.
So now there is in final P bar grammar, there is no use of T, right?
There is going to be no use of T's. Yes, that happens in this example. So you will get some useless symbols and useless productions in P hat. So that's a very good observation. I agree. But this is the grammar we get by this procedure. Okay. By the way, if your grammar has got some useless non-terminals and rules from that, it does not contribute to any extra strings, and they can be, left there or they can be removed. Okay. So you are absolutely right. This grammar P hat we have got has already got some unit productions which were there, some epsilon productions which were there, and we have just added things to it. Right? But it has, in the process, we have shown that there are some things which are useless. This is the key observation of yours. Okay. But first see the construction. So in this constructed grammar, our claim is that, what is our claim? The claim is that if there are two claims. There is one claim that is not written here. Claim 1. L of G hat which is if you derive with this new set of productions, you will get the same language as the old one. There is no change. Why is that? Can anybody justify this? So Ishan, you want to tell me why the language doesn't change by adding these rules?
I think we can prove that each one of them is a subset of the other.
Yeah. So one way is clear because you only added rules. So the new language LG has, if at all, will be a superset of language of LG, right? Yeah.
And the other way I think we can do is that all the rules that we have added, they can also be achieved in the original language, original grammar.
Right. So the way you show it is if there is a production which at some point uses this new rule A goes to alpha beta, right? Then you can transform that application of that rule by 2 steps, the left hand side of this reduction, right? And you will get an expanded derivation which will give you the same result. So every application of this added rule can actually be eliminated from the derivation by adding some old rules, steps with old rules. That is the way you show it. Okay, so you will find the formal proof in Cousin. But the reason should be clear. Wherever in the derivation, somewhere, you started with S and you went to, and then you got some string, let us say gamma 1, A gamma 2, right? And this A was in the next step rewritten as gamma 1 alpha beta gamma 2. Using this added rule, A goes to alpha beta. And then there was some other derivation which was done. Then this step can be replaced by these 2 steps because this rule was added only if there were 2 such rules in the grammar which are still there. So instead of gamma A gamma 2, you will go to gamma, this A will go to gamma B gamma 2 and then B will go to epsilon, right? So you can transform the derivation to derive the same string X. It will become a little longer, but you will always be able to derive it. And similarly for, if there was an application of this rule, then you can show that at some point you can replace that step by these 2 rules. So clear? I hope nobody is confused. It should be fairly easy to see. And I think in computer science, you have to be able to give this kind of structural arguments. So, I think if you pay a little bit of attention, you will be able to give these arguments. They are not difficult. So Akash, is this okay for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So the language remains same. The second claim is this. Suppose we have a derivation S which gives you a string X in the new grammar G hat. Of course, there could have been a derivation in the old grammar G also for this X because the languages are same. But suppose this is the shortest length derivation. That is, it derives X in the least number of steps, right? And of course, we assume that this X is not epsilon because, okay, so we'll forget about epsilon. Okay, so any non-empty string which is derived in the new grammar by a shortest derivation, if it has a derivation, it could have many possible ways in which you can derive X. You choose one of the shortest length. It need not be unique. There may be two derivations of shortest length. Pick any one. So take the shortest derivation of X in the grammar G hat. The claim is that this derivation does not use epsilon rule or unit production. Epsilon production or unit productions are never used in the shortest derivation in this new grammar G hat. So how do we show that? We prove that by contradiction, right? So we will continue with this example. Do I have this grammar converted? No. So I'll have to leave this as it is. Okay. So we have got this new grammar P hat and the old grammar P, which is given here. This is the intermediate one. So don't worry about this one. Okay. You have this old set of productions P and P hat. Now take the shortest length derivation within this P hat, which gives you a terminal string, such that S goes to something, some alpha, and within that, this still has a unit production in it. It still has a unit production in it, and it still has these epsilon rules productions in it. So suppose somewhere you got alpha S beta, some arbitrary string beta, and a unit production was used. So you rewrote this as alpha, and then instead of S, you wrote this as T. Sorry, am I not switching to blue? T beta. You applied a unit rule here, right? And then that T, you then rewrote this T at some point, you know, to what did you use? T had a rule. Let's say T went to beta. You rewrote this as alpha. Sorry, gamma and beta, right? So you did two steps like this. S went to T and then T went to gamma. Agreed? This is what you did. In that case, we have this, and then this beta finally went and derived X. So this, let's say coming up to this took some M steps. This took some K steps. This took one step and this took one step. So the total number of steps you took was how much? M plus K plus 2. Right? In this derivation going from S to X, which we said was the shortest derivation, we took M plus these two steps, one of which was a unit rule. But if there was a unit rule of the form S goes to T and T goes to gamma, we have added a rule which says that S goes to gamma. We have added a new rule. So we could have done the same derivation like this. This is star in some number of steps. This is in some number of steps, M number of steps, right? So we could have gone in the same M number of steps to S beta. Then we could have made a single step and taken this S to gamma directly. So we would have taken alpha, gamma and beta directly, right? Oh, this beta should be this in one step, right? And then since we have got alpha, gamma, beta, we mimic exactly what goes on in the remaining part. So this in some K steps will give you X. So now we have got a new derivation whose length is what? Rishi, what is the length of this new? This was the old derivation. This is the new derivation. This is an old derivation where a unit rule was used. Here we substitute that unit rule and the following substitution of T by a single step. So what is the length of this derivation? Hi Rishi. Okay, Piyush. Pooja. Okay, anybody? Anybody would calculate for me the length of this new derivation?
M plus K plus 1.
M plus, so it's shorter. So size of this was M plus K plus 2, whereas size of this derivation is M plus K plus 1. So the assumption that, you know, we had the shortest derivation for string X is not true. In the shortest derivation, there cannot be a unit rule because, you know, that unit rule would just substitute one non-terminal by another, and that would at some later point get substituted by gamma. We could have directly substituted S by gamma at this position itself. Okay. So that's the rule. So it cannot have unit production, and similarly it cannot have an epsilon rule, because every time you applied the epsilon rule, you could have directly, you know, gone to that string without adding epsilon, you know, directly. So it's easy to see that in the shortest derivation, you know, in this new expanded grammar, there is no need for using the unit rules and the epsilon rules. So we may as well discard it without changing the language. So you remove all epsilon and useless production from P hat. So if we remove epsilon and useless productions from this grammar, what is the grammar you will get? I will write it in black. So S goes to ASA will remain because that is neither unit nor epsilon. BSB will remain. S goes to T is a unit production, so I can remove that. S goes to epsilon is an epsilon production, so I can remove that. S goes to A will remain. S goes to B will remain. Similarly, T goes to A will remain. T goes to B will remain. T goes to epsilon will grow away. And this is the new grammar that I have got. Okay. And this is a grammar without any epsilon or unit productions, which generates same language except for epsilon. Because we have removed these rules which go to epsilon, this new grammar G1 that we have got here, you know, we'll have same language as the original grammar except for string epsilon. So this is the first property. By the way, here there was an observation which was very correct. Now, if you see in this grammar, if you start with S and see all the sentential forms that you can derive using it, nowhere does T appear on the right hand side of any rule. So this T is useless. So you could have also further optimized this grammar by removing this T. So there is this extra step that you may take, which is called removing useless non-terminals. Okay. And that will not change the language, but even if you leave them, they are not going to harm. They are never going to be used in any real derivation. Okay, so we will not go through. I mean, there is an easy way to remove the useless non-terminals to detect which non-terminals are useless. I will not go through it. Somewhere in Cozen you will find it. Okay, but I will leave them be. So is the transformation from, so given a grammar G, you know, we obtain G1 where we have removed epsilon and unit productions. So given this grammar, what will be the corresponding G1 that I will get? I have already written it, but what rule would we apply to reduce this? First, given this, what is the rule I will add? So can Ishan tell me, if this is my G, in G hat, what extra rules will I add?
S going to AB.
Right, because S goes to S and this S goes to epsilon. So I can erase this S directly and S goes to AB. This is added to it, right? So basically I get this goes to AB. This is my additional thing that I get. Okay, now within this I will remove epsilon. There is no unit productions. Now I will, and I cannot add anything more here. Now I will remove all the epsilon rules, etc. So I'll get the grammar S goes to ASB or S goes to AB. Okay, and this is the equivalent grammar without epsilon or unit rules. By the way, what was the language of the original grammar?
A raised to N, B raised to N.
A raised to N, B raised to N, where N could be greater than equal to 0, right? Epsilon string we are not able to derive here. So you will get the grammar which will give this for N greater than 0, right? Equal to 0 doesn't work. This is the language of this grammar. This is the first step. Next step is, you know, we want to transform this into Chomsky normal form. That is, there are only doubling rules and there are terminal rules. These are the two kinds of rules that are. Because we want, you know, only terminal rules to occur on the letters to occur only in the terminal rules. They cannot occur in doubling rules. What we do is, for every letter, we add a fresh new non-terminal. So for small a to this grammar, we add a new non-terminal called capital A. And we make capital A go to small a. Similarly, for small b, we add a new non-terminal called capital B, and we make b to go to this. A does not go to anything else, B does not go to anything else. So this capital A is just placeholder for small a and b. So in this string, because we had small a followed by capital S followed by B, now I can rewrite it as S goes to capital A, S capital B, and you know, then that by a separate rule that capital A can go to small a and capital, so nothing very intelligent, you know, I mean, it is just some minor manipulation. Similarly, in this rule, S goes to small a, small b, we replace this small a by capital A and small b by capital B. So in all the rules on the right hand side, wherever terminals occur, you replace them by corresponding non-terminals. Replace terminals by fresh non-terminals and make those non-terminals go to the terminal in terminal rules. So is this transformation clear? Now, anybody has doubt that the language hasn't changed? Piyush? Pooja? Satish? Sorry. Suraj?
Yes, sir.
So, do you agree that the language hasn't changed by this transformation?
Yes.
Instead of deriving directly this A, we have added a capital A, which in another step will be replaced by small a, right? So this is a little bit wasteful grammar that we have constructed. It takes more steps, but it does the same job, right? Instead of saying x is equal to x plus 2, you have said x is equal to x plus 1 and then added another one to that. Okay, so this is what we do. Now, so this is beginning to look like Chomsky grammar. You know, there are rules where non-terminals are replaced by increasing non-terminal sequence. You know, not doubling, but this is tripling. This is doubling. So we have sequences like that. Now we can remove these long sequences of non-terminals also by adding some fresh rules. So for every such long sequence which is of length larger than 2, you divide it into two parts. First non-terminal and the remaining one. And you give the remaining one a new name. So here we have got A goes to ASB. So to this sequence SB, you give a new name called C and you write a rule S goes to AC. And then you make that C go to that sequence SB. Now this in general, you would have rule which says S goes to B1, B2, BK. So you will replace this by S goes to B1, C1 and C1 will go to B2 to BK, right? So we can remove this rule and add these two rules and it will leave the language same. Now we apply the same transformation to C1. So we'll write this C1 as, sorry, let me write this C1 rule on this side. So I've added this rule, C1 goes to B2 to BK, right? Now I write that C1 as B2 followed by C2 and I will make that C2 to go from B3 to BK. Like this, I will keep reducing the length of the sequence till I get only length 2 rules, right? And this is how I can convert the grammar into Chomsky normal form. So here I already had S goes to SB. ASB is written by A goes to AC and C goes to SB, and this is already in Chomsky normal form. If this sequence was longer, I would have to add C1, C2, right? So I think the transformation of a grammar without epsilon or unit productions into Chomsky normal form grammar is easy, right? And it generates the same language as the original grammar G1. Okay, so this is my half of my theorem. I had this theorem that where is the theorem? Where is the theorem? Yeah. So for every grammar G, we can construct a grammar G prime in Chomsky normal form, which is same language except epsilon. And we did this first two steps to get a grammar in CNF. Now it is also possible, the procedure is a little bit complicated. You can convert a grammar G prime in CNF into a language equivalent grammar G double prime in GNF. And we will not do this proof today. Probably we will never do this proof. If you have an interest, you can read this up in Cozen or in Hopcroft. They give different proofs. If there is time later in the course, we'll do it. But you can assume that there is a procedure, a little bit more complicated than what we did for conversion to CNF. But it will work. There's just one trick there. Okay, so assume that the G prime can be converted to G double prime in GNF. And I will not ask you in example how to convert a grammar into GNF form, but I will ask you to convert grammars into CNF form. So is that clear? So we have done now, given an arbitrary context-free grammar, we can have an almost equivalent grammar in Chomsky normal form, and also an almost equivalent grammar in Greibach normal form. You should at least be able to spot whether the grammar is in Greibach normal form or Chomsky normal form. Okay, this is what we did today, and I wanted to do something more, but that will have to wait for the next class. So is this clear? Any questions? Now it is your time to talk.
So in the previous slide, when you said fresh non-terminals, you meant like we introduce certain non-terminals into the full set.
Right.
Set of n.
Right. Arvind, we are losing you. Can you say again? We are introducing some new non-terminals also into the grammar.
Yes, sir. That was my question.
Yeah. So all the old non-terminals remain the same. The start symbol remains the same. Only some new non-terminals and some new rules come into the grammar, right? And some old rules go away. So this rule S goes to ASB will go away. It will be replaced by this rule S goes to AC and C goes to SB. So let me underline that. That's an important question actually. This rule is replaced by this rule and this rule. And the effect is the same, right? Because instead of directly writing S as ASB, which was convenient, we can only expand the a non-terminal by two non-terminals. So we choose to expand it by S goes to AC, and then what can you do with C? Only one thing, S goes to SB, the remaining string. So it gives you back the old string and nothing else you can do with C. This C should never be used in any other rule at an, again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other? So these transformations are not difficult. They are very intuitive, but they sort of massage the grammar into come into certain form. So any other question? Now, why do we convert grammars into Chomsky normal form? I mean, it seems like more work, no? And then the grammar also looks more complicated, isn't it? So the reason is this theorem that, if you have an n-step derivation, it will, if you have a string of length n, it will require m-1 plus m steps to derive, a string x of length n, then you will, length m, then you will require 2m minus 1 steps to derive that string in Chomsky normal form grammar. In other grammars, you don't know what happens. If you've got unit production, epsilon rules, some long productions, the sentential forms increase and decrease in size, and you may go through a very long derivation which will derive it. The regularity of Chomsky normal form is that, there is a relationship between the size of the string and the number of steps of the derivation. Okay. In some sense, long strings have longer derivations, and that property we will utilize in the next class to give a test for whether a language is context free or not. Just as we had this question, are there languages which are not regular? And we showed that there were several non-regular languages like A raised to n, B raised to n. And we showed the languages are non-regular using some form of pumping lemma, which use this property that long strings have got derivations where certain states repeat. So there is a kind of loop through which the execution the run goes, and that loop can be pumped any number of times. Similarly, something like that will happen in this grammar, and we will use this property there. So Chomsky normal form makes, proofs of things easier. That is why we have converted to Chomsky normal form as well as Greibach normal form. But that is for the coming lectures. Okay, so that is all I have to say today. If there are no other questions, I will stop the recording. Any other questions? No, so I'll stop the recording.